The future is not an accident.
Good afternoon. I would like to express my sincerest appreciation for this opportunity to make a few remarks on the occasion of the 76th anniversary of the death of the founding president of the ANC Youth League, Anton Muziwakhe Lembede. 21 years ago, the then leadership of the ANC Youth League had the immense privilege to undertake a mission that had correctly belonged to the founding generation. We had to accompany our founding president, Anton Muziwakhe Lembede, to his final resting place at his home in Bumbulu, KwaZulu-Natal. Lembede, or Lems, as he was fondly referred to by his peers, the elephant that led from the front, had died mysteriously at Coronation Hospital on the 30th July 1947. His death shocked the oppressed community and robbed our people, our movement, and particularly the youth, of one of their brightest stars and most original thought leaders. Lembede combined in himself the qualities of immense and courageous thinking originality, scholarliness, and an organizer. He was as forthright as he was upright, demanding of the African youth that they be extremely disciplined in order to be prepared for the revolutionary tasks that lay ahead. He relentlessly engaged in public discourse, advocating for his ideas, unwavering in his championing of the cause of Africa as articulated in the ANC Youth League's founding manifesto. As soon as he became ANC Youth League president, he set forth with his whole being to build it into a formidable force for revolutionary action, sharpening its political outlook and forging its organizational capacity to fulfill the historic mission the founding generation had set themselves. He dedicated himself heart, body, and soul into his political and organizational responsibilities, following a rigorous and relentless regime which saw him fight the struggle, as Uncle Walter Sisulu would say, not only politically, but with all the impressive skills at his disposal. The outpouring of national grief on the occasion of his death from across the political spectrum was a demonstration of the esteem with which the young Lems, then 33 years old, was already held by the freedom-loving peoples of South Africa. His death was mourned not only by African nationalists, but also by renowned communists such as J.B. Marx and Govan Mbeki. This spoke to the cross-sectional respect for his ideas and contribution to the struggle, and was testimony to the respect he had already accumulated in the cause of the struggle. In undertaking this enormously heavy task to exhume his remains from Kruger Cemetery in Johannesburg, where he was buried in 1947, and carrying them to Mbumbulu village at his homestead, we did not at first appreciate the enormity of the responsibility we had imposed on our young shoulders. At the time, we thought we were simply honoring the wishes of his family to assist them to fulfill the unfinished journey of our president, which he had intended to undertake in 1947 when death dealt us that fatal blow. We immediately jumped into action and started consulting with the officials of the ANC, who advised us immediately to seek the blessings and wisdom of Madiba and Kamela before embarking on any further step. The leadership of the ANC rallied behind us as we undertook all the necessary steps leading to successful accomplishment of this noble task. However, it was only when we consulted Madiba and Kamela that it was brought to our attention that the task we were undertaking was bigger than us, and the man we intended accompanying home to Mbumbulu was held in very high esteem by his generation. Such was the prestige of President Lembede that the then ANC Secretary General, Kgalema Motlanthe, joined us on the date of his exhumation at Crusas Cemetery. Above it all, Madiba himself, President Mbeki, Deputy President Zuma, and the national officials of the ANC, as well as many former living leaders of the ANC Youth League, attended his reinterment ceremony in Bumbulu on 10 September 2002. Both Presidents Mandela and Mbeki delayed their UN General Assembly trips to New York in order to show support at this solemn ceremony. It can be said with no fear of contradiction that until then Bumbulu had never hosted a larger gathering of youth as on that day to erect a national monument of remembrance for a national hero of our people. For many years to come, we hoped that the youth would assemble around the resting place of this hero to draw strength, courage, and wisdom for the battles ahead. On this day, therefore, it is necessary that we reflect on what do we consider to be the lessons of the life, teachings, thoughts, and activism of President Lembede. We commit gross injustice to our icons if we simply freeze them in the past, as if their teachings, values, and examples are irrelevant to the present. We also do gross injustice to them if we propelled them to the future as if they have no past, simply because their past might be inconvenient to the economic powers that be. A.P. Mda, the second president of the ANC Youth League who succeeded President Lembede, actually laments this fact that LEMS is to present-day South Africans little more than a name from the past. Accordingly, not much intellectual, ideological, or scholarly effort has been made to make his radical views relevant to or resonate with present and future challenges. We have allowed liberal narratives to assume prominence in interpreting the meaning and contribution of many of the leaders of the liberation struggle to our society. In that regard, we have allowed some of our heroes and heroines to remain painted as scary figures from the past who have no or little relevance to the modern-day South Africa in accordance with what is acceptable to white liberals and the ruling class. Others, on the other hand, are portrayed in everyday lectures and imagery in ways that strip them of their revolutionary essence, as though their very lives were the epitome of liberal values and nothing more. This is very convenient to dominant narratives that seek to delegitimize the revolutionary essence of our struggle and replace them with reformist ideas of a society enjoying civil rights and that is content with existence within the neo-colonial framework. Instead of memorializing our late heroes and heroines in ways that impel us to carry on this revolutionary struggle until the very end, we get long lamentations about what a bad, corrupt, and unethical folk we have become compared to these late saints. They are thus interpreted in ways that limit our expectation of the current dispensation and are turned into instruments through which to whip us into venerating the status quo. The silent message communicated through such acts is that the past was more ethical than the present, that life and governance was better during white minority rule than it is now. This is intended to normalize white rule in our minds and to make us yearn once again for so-called white excellence because black self-rule is inadequate. Of course, we have to demand higher standards of the current dispensation, but memorial lectures must be more about suggesting ways the further to push the boundaries of social transformation instead of making pitiful lamentations. They must deal with the reality that black people still to this day remain the biggest victims of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and remain excluded from the benefits of the country's economic prowess. They remain junior partners in the country's economy, mere managers of the economic status quo, carrying out, as Professor Sipho Siepe argues, the logic of the white economic system. The majority of the peoples of Africa have not seen the benefits of the act of liberation, trapped as they still remain in poverty and inequality, being junior partners in the global political and economic sphere. The problem is that most of our political and business leaders have become satisfied with the status quo because they benefit from it. They have no desire to change it. Actually, and they see no alternative existing outside white economic rule and black junior partnership in that system. No indigenous black-owned business institutions that are global champions and are independent of the white-dominated minerals energy complex have been created out of the current dispensation. This condemns black business to mere appendages of the white corporate system and black corporate leaders to an existence subject to white economic interests. The dominant discourse in our country has defined the parameters of what is acceptable, only that which reinforces the status quo and treats with hostility anyone or anything that deviates from this framework. This means public lectures are acceptable only if they venerate the status quo. Only Thomas Piketty has recently dared talk about inequality and made even radical proposals regarding how to address it. Yet it should matter to us that the Lembede, extolled as one of the most original intellectuals and virtually the father of African nationalism in South Africa, should have his views adapted to the present-day situation, through which to rally the masses of our people into action to complete the struggle against colonialism. Lembede's views remain a relevant rallying cry for the completion of the goals of our struggle, a reminder that colonialism was more than a system of racial hate, but was an entire social system, the eradication of which demands more than tinkering with colonial social and economic relations. Lembede believed that all the problems faced by Africans, poverty, disease, infant mortality, as well as moral and spiritual degeneration, were because of the political and economic system unleashed by colonialism against them. He believed that only national freedom would free them from all these ills and enable them fully to exploit and bring to fruition their divine talents and make a meaningful contribution towards human progress and development. The 1969 strategy and tactics echoed these views in stating that political transfer of power from the white minority regime would have to go hand in hand with destroying colonial social and economic relations. Therefore, President Lembede's message is that the struggle against colonialism did not end when we voted to end white minority rule in 1994. Failure over the past 3 decades to significantly transform the country's economic system, its production relations and ownership relations, has left the foundation and logic of colonialism intact. But it has also diminished the mobilizing force of African nationalism and weakened the unity of the black majority, thus helping to revive the lost strength of white supremacy. African nationalism becomes weak, almost irrelevant, in the absence of a national economic program that draws all the hitherto oppressed national forces together. This is evidenced by the split of the black political vote and splits among black political parties, while white political forces are consolidating their unity and electoral support. Black people have a plethora of political parties for which to vote, and next year there will even be many individuals standing as independents, whilst millions of our people will also be encouraged not to vote. White South Africans, on the other hand, only have 2 main political parties for which to vote, both of which are united on the urgency to defend and protect white economic interests and will attract a lot of black votes in addition. Racial divisions in our country remain rife. driven by the same logic of racialized capitalism, and we do injustice to our own cause in denying their existence. American economist Jeffrey Sachs argues that the ferocious quest for wealth leaves society bereft of the benefits of social trust, honesty, and compassion. Even former IMF chief economist Joseph Stiglitz acknowledges that governments around the world are not addressing key economic problems, which all along he and other world's leading economists had argued would be best addressed by the markets. Governments are failing to manage the economy in the interests of all their citizens, and markets, on the other hand, lack moral character in spite of their enormous power. Unregulated markets reproduce inequality, and without leadership, the political system reinforces the market's failures rather than correct them. French economist Thomas Piketty points out that economic development and human progress have only historically been made possible by struggles for equality, and not the sanctification of property, stability, or inequality. The last time there was a concerted discussion about poverty and inequality in South Africa was about a decade ago. Nowadays, we are preoccupied about everything that has very little to do with how we can end poverty in our lifetime. It is therefore important that the black majority must not satisfy themselves with mere economic reforms and a meager existence within a white-dominated social system. It would seem that many among us have lost our sense of ambition regarding comprehensive economic transformation. We have become comfortable with the socio-economic status quo. But African nationalism is a call to seek meaningful change, not only in the form of our society, but above everything else in its content. African nationalism shifts the focus away from what the struggle is against towards what it is about and what it is for. In grappling with African nationalism, President Lembede helped the ANC come to grips with its own character as well as the content of the struggle. He believed that an ANC seized of such monumental responsibilities had to be united. He eschewed factionalism, which had until then paralyzed the movement, thus weakening the united front against racial tyranny as well as the capacity of the masses. Contrary to much vaunted opinion of President Lembede's African nationalism, his ideas were constantly evolving along with his growing experience in the struggle and interaction with other ideas and fellow comrades. Only early death halted the full blossoming of his ideas, but the much he bequeathed us suffices to tell a story of a man grappling with difficult questions of the day, in order, as Marx would say, much earlier, to change the world. Our country would do well to constantly reflect not only on the totality of the ideas of such a luminary, but to break them down into their various elements in order fully to appreciate their wholesome meaning. I thank you.